when Abraham and Isaac went up on the mountain to sacrifice to God. Now this, most anybody that's ever been around a Bible for any length of time, they know this part of the scripture. But in this, we have people, I was listening to some, don't even know what I was listening to the other day, but it came up, it was, I don't know if it was supposed to be some kind of news show or some kind of talk show, but the woman kept saying, but what kind of God would have asked somebody to sacrifice their child? And the other man was saying, but look at the faith of Abraham. That's what you're supposed to look at, is the faith of Abraham. But she kept saying, but what kind of monster could God be that would tell a man to sacrifice his own son? God sacrificed his for us. But I think we miss the point so often down in here, and I'm just going to sum this up. I'm not going to read scripture, I'm just going to sum it up. Isaac was the promised child. Abraham had been promised that he would be the father of nations. And you're talking to a man who's 100 years old and he has no children. His wife, I think the Bible says she was 90. We would not get real thrilled at 90 years old to find out we were going to have a baby. It's usually biologically impossible. But can you imagine, I have a friend who was picking at a girl we worked with one day who had recently gotten married, and she was about 40. And my friend was talking to her, and she said, well, you know, having a baby at 40 is not so bad. She wasn't having a baby, she was just picking. Having a baby at 40 is not so bad, but when you have to chase the 2-year-old when you're 42, that's a problem. You know, that's a problem when you try to keep up with a 2-year-old child and you got a little bit of age on you. But anyway, these people were old, but God made a promise. And they had to wait on that promise. Sometimes we get a little impatient waiting on the promises of God today. But if God promised, God delivers. And in this, Abraham and Sarah had this baby. And they named him Isaac. And Abraham, God had spoke to him and told him to take that child up on the mountain and sacrifice him, use him as a sacrifice. Abraham, through faith, the Bible don't even say that he argued with God. Now, I would have been talking to the Lord about it. I would be saying, God, am I hearing you right? Is that really what you said? But there's no place that says that Abraham questioned what God said. If it was, I don't remember that part. But he took him up on the mountain, and he is telling the people, he puts the wood on Isaac's back, and I think it says he picked up something to the oil burning, whatever, to go make up an altar, and they go up the mountain. Before they go up the mountain, Abraham says to his people, his servants that went with him, you wait here. The child and I will go up to the mountain to sacrifice, and we will return. And people miss that. We will return. There was no doubt in Abraham's mind that when he came back down off that mountain, he would have Isaac with him. Now, he didn't know how that was going to happen, but he had enough faith that if he had to sacrifice his son, that God was going to raise him from the dead. And we miss that. We miss that. We get so hung up on how we would view that we miss the important stuff. God had made a promise. And if God makes a promise, God keeps a promise. He doesn't break those promises. So Abraham takes Isaac up the mountain, and as they're going, the child asks the question, why not? He's old enough to realize we're going to sacrifice something, and there ain't nothing here to sacrifice. Daddy, what we doing? Father, whatever he called him. Daddy, what you doing? You forgot something. We don't have anything to sacrifice. And Abraham answers him, how? God will. So up the mountain they went. They get up there, and Abraham is getting ready to put Isaac on the altar, and it doesn't even say that Isaac put up a fight. But Abraham gets ready to put his son on the altar, and an angel speaks and says, whoa, whoa. This is our language, not theirs. Whoa, don't do that. Stop right where you are. Many times have you said something to somebody like that, whoa, right there, just stop where you are. And the angel says, stop. And over in a thicket, which just means caught in the vines, there was a lamb. And Abraham sacrificed that lamb. But he had enough faith in God that if God wanted that child to be sacrificed, God would raise that child, because that was the child of promise. God promised Abraham that his seed, and Isaac was that seed, would be the father of nations, and that through his lineage Everybody was going to be blessed. We're blessed because Abraham was obedient. And that finishes up last Sunday's lesson. How was that? I had myself a note, go back and finish last Sunday's lesson because I said I'd go back and do that so we can get summarized and get in here and get where we're supposed to be. I did want to go ahead and say, unless I'm reading stuff wrong, homecoming is October the 1st. Where's people who know? I think that's right. And on October the 1st, thank you. On October the 1st, we won't have Sunday school. Church will start at 10:30 because we're going to have homecoming. So y'all mark your little calendars. I may forget and show up. If I forget, then that means I won't be cooked dinner. I'll be all messed up that day. So going on into this morning's lesson, we're going to be talking about Isaac blesses Jacob. Now here we are, Isaac is old. We've gone from being the child of promise to a possible sacrifice to God, sort of, like a better word, rescued him by putting a lamb there. And here he is, Isaac is now old, and he has children of his own, and he's been through a lot, but this has just taken us over. I was on my way to church, and right down by Jackie's mom and daddy's old house, I saw something go running across the road. I thought it was Jake's dog, and I thought, ooh. And I slowed down. I wasn't going fast, but I slowed down some more because I thought if that dog runs back across the road, I don't want to hit my neighbor's dog. And about the time I slowed down a little bit more, here came the second deer. I thought that dog looked awfully big, but here come another deer across in front of me. I think it was a doe, but I don't know one from the other, but I think it was probably a little doe. Didn't have any horns or anything. Isn't that usually a doe? So anyway, and I thought to myself, where are the hunters? Where are all these people who talk about going deer hunting all the time? I almost got us one with the car. I didn't even need a gun to go hunting. But anyway, that just leads us into some more of the lesson. God's plan for humanity will be fully realized despite the sinfulness of people. In spite of us, God's promises will be fulfilled. His plans for humanity will be fulfilled. I've got to get my Bible out. I brought my Bible, but I don't have to turn pages. Oh, good gracious, what a day for you not to recognize me for who I am. Today's lesson reminds us of two great complementary truths. God's purpose for this world will not be thought. You will not destroy God's plan. There are people who seem to get the idea sometimes if I sit down and take a rest, everything's just going to come to a slow grinding halt and wait on me to catch up. It ain't happening. If you sit down, things will go right on without you. And you'll either be that far behind and you got to catch up, or you're going to be left altogether. I don't want to be sitting down resting when the rapture takes place. I've been thinking an awful lot about the rapture lately. And I just believe we're just about that close. And trying to tell people about the rapture, it's not so much the rapture as it is what's going to happen after the rapture if you're still here, what you're going to have to go through. But God's plans and purposes for this world will not be, you cannot interrupt his plan. Sometimes I talk to the Lord and I say, now God, you don't ask me these questions, but I ask God a lot of questions. We have a lot of conversations, but unfortunately I'm not a very good listener, so I have a hard time. But I talk to God sometimes and I say, you know, Lord, sometimes it just seems like an impossible situation. What is coming seems impossible to me. We seem to have, in my mind, so little time and so much to do. It's kind of like when you're cleaning the house up and somebody's coming and you feel like you have run out of time because you wanted to have lunch cooked and they might be going to spend the night. You want to make sure that extra bedroom's got clean sheets and you've at least rearranged the dust. You can't always get rid of it, but you've at least rearranged the dust getting ready for company, and you've run out of time. And sometimes that's the way my mind works. I think, God, we're running out of time. Are we going to accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish? And the answer to that is yes. You know, I might fail, you might fail, but God's plan will go on. And what God has deemed is going to happen will happen. Then the second thing we need to be reminded of is God uses even the sinful acts of human beings to accomplish his good and perfect will. You know, we forget that sometimes. That God can use anybody. If he can make a donkey talk, then God can do anything. And if you flip back in the Bible a little bit, you'll find where the donkey talked. You know, sometimes God moves in ways we don't understand. But these two truths, which may appear to be incompatible, are nevertheless found throughout Scripture. While we may not be able to fully reconcile how God's goodwill is accomplished, even through the act of sinful people, our inability does not negate this reality. You look at people that's got money. That's not me, so. You look at people that's got money and they donate a donut. I don't even eat donuts. They donate huge amounts of money to charity, to building a wing at a hospital. Look at the Levine Children's Center in Charlotte. St. Jude's Hospital in Tennessee. I think that's right. I think I got that in the right state. Look at what these people, and I'm not saying those men were sinners. I don't know anything about them. But you look at that, and everybody, most of us look at Christian people, we don't think they got very much money. And it amazes me when I think back to that old white church that probably only a few of us remember. When I think back to that old white church that used to sit back there. Now, some of y'all are cold in here, and I'm sweating. I'm sweating. But that old white church back yonder didn't have air conditioning. It had what you call the open door policy, the open window policy. The windows were open. Sometimes the doors were open. They had one of the big fans up in the ceiling. Our Sunday school classes, you could take the petitions down. If we had a singing, like we're going to have, I think, with the homecoming, we just took the petitions down, and all the Sunday school rooms became part of the sanctuary. Never mind. Debbie was too young to remember. I can take you back and almost show you where the outside bathrooms were. The ladies was over by the cemetery, and the men's was a little bit closer over to the woods. And up a little ways between the two of them was an old hand pump. Nobody wants to go back to those days, but oh, what a good time we had. And even back then, when you listen to people talk, they were talking about the second coming of the Lord. They were talking about the rapture taking place. And those people could put the fear of God in you in a very quick. Sister Alma used to be notorious for her prayers that she used to pray. And she would make the statement, sometimes you have to put legs on your prayers. Now by that she was talking about she visited all the time. And she would pray for somebody, then she'd show up on the doorstep. And I don't reckon she ever met a person that she didn't stop and invite them to church. Probably everybody she came in, or even somebody, if you made the mistake of dialing her number by mistake, you would get a message and an invitation to church, because that was the way she thought. But even sinful people can be used by God to accomplish what he wants to see accomplished. Our golden text comes from Genesis 25 and 23, and it says, the Lord said to Rebekah, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Now this is backwards from biblical time. The oldest was always left with the family inheritance. The firstborn got the blessings, got the birthright. Some of us would have got left out because we're not the firstborn child. Or some of us would be left out anyway because they didn't leave all the stuff to the women. I wouldn't have made it back in those days. I wouldn't make it in an Eastern country that some of those countries still think women should not make eye contact with people. And y'all know me walking around looking down ain't gonna work. And I obviously don't know how to do that because in addition to breaking my toe the other day, I'm 99.9% sure it was broken. I went to get something out of the pantry day before yesterday, and I knocked something over, and a can came down and struck me in my ankle. And I thought, Lord, now I'm not going to be able to walk. If it's not one thing, it's another. I don't ever watch, I never look down to see what's going on around me. I'm looking out yonder somewhere. And it's not because I'm trying to figure things out, because you can ask anybody, I don't know anything goes on around me. Is that not true? I don't ever know what's going on around me. I don't feel like I've missed anything. What do you think of when you hear familiar Bible names like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon? What do you think of when you hear those names? Boy, y'all are real talkative today. Y'all didn't have as much coffee as I've had. actually had some whole strength caffeinated coffee last night. I had to sit down, my heart was going I don't usually drink high octane coffee. It's usually either decaf or half and half. First thing I think about is all these names are out of the Old Testament. These are not New Testament characters, these are Old Testament characters. But if you look at them, God used each one of them to fulfill a promise somewhere along the line or something that needed to be done. I still get hung up on Solomon being wise and him being married 700 times, plus 300 extras. I don't know how you even calculate that in your head. That means there was 1,000 women in that man's life, and he was considered wise. Even to women, that sounds strange. I guess that was it. I don't know what they did. As we trace the history of God's people and the progress of God's covenant promises, we quickly learn that since the fall, are not born into being a perfect person. You know, even little babies, and to us, they're perfect. You know, most mothers, if they be honest, and grandmas do it too, you count those little fingers. You count those little toes. You make sure that they have the right numbers of fingers and toes. And I was asking, so I said something to somebody the other day, and I said, y'all don't understand. I might have said it up here. We get babies, and women especially, but some men do too. You act so foolish. Now, I've got grandchildren, I know. You act so foolish. And some people do the goo-goo, gaga, and I ain't never heard a baby say goo-goo and gaga. Never heard that from a kid. They blow little bubbles and all that good stuff, and they make grunting noises, and if they smile at daddy, it's because they got gas, but if they smile at mom, it's because they recognize mama's voice and all that good stuff. It just depends on who's doing the talking. But we are born into a world of sin because of Adam. We are not born perfect, but God uses us. He uses people even before they have prayed a prayer of repentance. God can still use them. I'm not reading all this because if I do, we won't ever get through, and y'all know that, so I'm just going to give you the scriptures as we go. This is coming from Genesis, the 27th chapter. The first part of it is 1 through 4. Our book gives us a little bit, so I'm going to read it. He said, Behold, now I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver, and thy bow, and go out into the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. This is Isaac talking to Esau. Now these boys are twins, Jacob and Esau. They were twins. And in the Bible, I back up a little bit. I did a little bit of reading, and we read the golden text where Rebekah had two nations warring in her womb, and these two sons, when they were born, the oldest son was born, and yet the youngest son was holding on to his heel as he was born. That's scripture. Holding on to the heel, and the name Jacob basically means that he's going to deceive people. That's what his name meant. And his life reflected that. Esau was an outdoor man. And Jacob, they said, liked to stay in. He made me think, I had this picture of him that would have been totally wrong. But I had this picture of Jacob, you know, he's all neatly dressed, and, you know, his hair is combed, and he's this, and he's this, and it didn't say he was lazy or anything like that. He was not an outdoorsy person. Esau was an outdoorsman. He hunted, he evidently planted. He was a hairy person. He had the smell of the outdoors on him. Jacob, on the other hand, was smooth-skinned, and he didn't smell like the great outdoors. In my mind, he smelled clean, while his brother smelled musky. That's just the way I think of them two fellas. But inside of them, it says the seed of Eve will battle with the seed of the serpent. This is going back. This is a foreshadow of this fall that we're working with. So while human conflict is an inevitable result of the fall, God's plan will triumph. Again, God's plan is always going to triumph. We don't understand. We can't see how it's going to happen. Sometimes we think, Lord, I just don't, something's wrong. I've got the wrong picture of this, or something is wrong with my understanding. And there might be something wrong with my understanding, but there's nothing wrong with God's plan and the way God will accomplish what he set out to do. In Genesis 25, it tells of God blessing Isaac and Rebekah with twins, and saying Esau the elder would serve the younger, Jacob. This was backwards. In the biblical days, the younger people served the older brother. He would have inherited the land. He would have inherited money, the cattle, whatever his daddy had, and the younger would be servants, would would serve the older. I don't really know how to put that in a little bit better word. I wrote myself, oh, that's something else. God's plan often clashed with the norms of society. If you go back and look, Seth became the chosen line. Isaac was chosen over Ishmael. Joseph and Judah were also chosen over their older brothers. And God's blessings do not rely on cultural rights, but on his eternal purposes. God don't care what culture says. He overrules culture. Who was I talking to the other day? And I thought, it is so funny when people ask this question, and they will inevitably ask it, where did God come from? I read somewhere, and I think I told y'all, I read somewhere where it was talking about, I don't know where it was at, but it was asking the question, which came first, God or an egg? I thought, how foolish. What a question. God came first. Where would the egg have come from if God hadn't already been here? You know, God was here before. Before what? Before anything. Because the Bible says that God spoke. And when he spoke the universe into existence. I don't care what science tells you. You know, the Big Bang Theory, where all these little atoms and all these little whatevers just bumped accidentally together, and out of that became the planets. Well, where do you think the little pieces of rock came from that bumped together, if you want to believe that, that's how it happened? Somewhere those rocks had to be put here. And you still got to trace it back. God made the rocks. So however, if you want to believe the Big Bang Theory, you believe it. I believe that God said, let there be, and it was there. You know, if you want to believe another way, that's between you and God. The birthright included, and again, we're going to talk about the birthright in a minute. The birthright included a double portion of the inheritance and a greater position of honor in the family. It belonged to the oldest son, but it could be transferred as Esau sold his birthright to Jacob in exchange for a meal. You remember Esau had been out hunting, and he came in, and his brother's already evidently cooking. And you know, sometimes when you're hungry, especially if you're hungry, you smell something cooking on the stove, and your mouth will start watering. You're already ready to eat long before the meal is ready. But Esau came in, and he wants his brother to give him some food. I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm starving, I'm thirsty, I've been out all day. Does anybody in here hunt? Do you hunt? You get that hungry when you're hunting? Yeah. Hungry, thirsty. We used to crack jokes about if you took Grandma fishing, you had to pack a meal. Because Grandma would go at daylight, and she'd come home after dark. And Lord, that's, huh? No, the fish didn't have to be biting. Melly would just stay on the creek bank. But I've seen them stop them many a time and get them a couple of cans of sardines and some saltine crackers, and they could spend the day at the river. I did not inherit that trait from the Dixons. I'd rather sit beside of you I'll read a book while you fish. I don't really care that much about fishing. But anyway, I forgot what I was saying. The birthright. He came in, he was hungry, he was thirsty, he was ill, and he wanted food, and he wanted it now. So he says to Jacob, his brother, give me some food to eat. Now, if my sister had knocked on my door hungry and said, give me some food, I would have gone in the kitchen and fixed her something to eat. I wouldn't have been worried about a birthright, but I don't know that we had one, so I don't know that that would matter. But he was hungry. So his brother, his name means deceiver. So he looks at his brother and he says, okay, I'll feed you, but I want your birthright, which will give him the double portion, which will put him in charge of stuff. So he says, you give me your birthright as the eldest child, and I'll feed you. And Esau, who at that point in time had no concern whatsoever about what he was giving up, says to his brother, does it mean to me if I starve? You know, take it, I don't care, just give me something to eat. The birthright didn't mean a whole lot to him if that was his attitude. You know, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I don't care what you do, let's move on. So, I lost my place again. God had made known his will that Jacob would receive the blessing, yet Isaac was determined to give Esau the birthright. Isaac at this point in time wasn't really interested in what God wanted. He was going to go on and move in the way tradition would have it, and he was going to give everything to Esau, the oldest son. And I should have backed up a little bit and said, even though these boys were twins, they were obviously not identical twins. And if you read in there, the father favored the oldest child. Esau was his pick. But Mama's pick was little Jacob over here. And Mama saw to it that Jacob was taken care of. It's too bad Annette's not here. I could ask her questions about twins. Other than the fact that this seems like double the work. I don't know what else you do with little twins. The next part is Rebekah plots to bless Jacob, and in this, if you're following along, that'll be in Genesis 27, 5 through 13. All of that's not in the book, and I'm just going to read what's in our book. And Rebekah heard what Isaac spake to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt for venison and to bring it, and now therefore, my son, obey my voice according according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock and fetch me some thence two good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth, and thou shalt bring it to thy father, and he may eat, that he may bless thee before his death. He went and fetched and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. That's where I stopped. I went too far. Now here you got Rebekah, who overhears a conversation with Isaac. Isaac is talking to Esau, and when he's talking to Esau, he tells him, I don't know when I'm going to die. None of us do. But Isaac was aware of the fact that he was getting old, probably was having health issues, and he says to his son, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. I need to go ahead and bless you. I need to give you what is going to be rightfully yours. So before I do all that, go out into the forest and kill that deer that I missed. Go into the forest and get venison. Bring me savory meat. Bring me the foods that I like to eat so that I may bless you. Well, Mama's out here listening in on this conversation. So Mama goes to the little boy, goes to the younger son. I shouldn't call him a little boy, the other twin, the youngest twin. And she says to him, what you need to do is listen to me. I'm going to tell you what to do. You go out into the flock. And you bring me 2 kids, 2 goats, two little creatures. And I'm going to fix your father food so that when he gets through eating, he's going to think you're going to take it into him. He's going to think that you're Esau. And he's going to bless you. He's going to give you your inheritance. You're going to get what would rightfully go to the older son, but I'm going to make sure you get it. Now, it's hard for me to understand that Mama would plot like that. But Mama was bound, bent, and determined, and actually Mama was being used by God. She might not have known that, but this was God's plan all along. So, lost my place again. Isaac and Rebekah had been childless until God gave them this twins, and even though the blessing that God had given them, each parent came to favor one son over the other. Isaac desired to give the birthright to Esau over Jacob, and Rebekah conspired to deceive her husband into giving that birthright to Jacob. When they move on, these divisions in the family are strong, and Isaac has spoke to his son while Rebekah spoke to her son. If you go in there and you read this, when it refers to Esau, it usually will be like Isaac's son, or Isaac told his son, where Rebekah's over here, and when you're talking about Rebekah, she calls Jacob her son. Now, but these are twin brothers, so obviously Isaac is the father of both, and Rebekah's the mother of both. But one parent favored one child. And people think everybody does that. You have different relationships with all your children. It doesn't mean you love one child more than you love another child. You have a different, some children need you more than other children do. And you get that relationship, it's a different kind of relationship. And you need to understand that. Parents have to understand that, or you'll get caught up in stuff, and your children will come up with, well, you just love them more than you love me in the first place. That's not true. They needed me more. They needed me more. And some people will say, well, that firstborn child, there's nothing like that relationship you have with that firstborn child. That child is what made your mother. That firstborn child is this. That firstborn child was that. And then you have other people say, well, I was so young when the first one was born, I didn't know what I was doing. And when by the time the second one came along, I was more prepared and I knew how to do this, this, and this. And the relationship changed. But it doesn't mean either child is loved more. But in this case, you kind of have a tendency to want to wonder a little bit. But Rebekah had overheard Jacob when he was talking about the birthright, so she acted to kind of circumvent her husband. In her plan, Jacob was going to receive the birthright before Isaac realized what had happened. Now, she went to great lengths to deceive her husband. You know, that don't mean nothing to me. She plotted to ensure that Jacob could succeed in this description. I'm going to have to skip off because Dean's already flashing fingers at me. Jacob had concerns about this plan, fearing that his father would curse him, and here a curse would be referred to as a public word for contempt that would follow Jacob for the rest of his life, resulting in misfortune and even an untimely death. He would be cursed because he would be breaking what is tradition. We don't understand a lot of this stuff because we don't have these traditions. This is more than a family disagreement happening here because God's plan as well as his commands are in view. God had this planned ahead of time. In the end, she serves as an example, meaning Rebekah, serves as an example of God's honoring his promise despite the inappropriate actions of his people. Now here she is, she gets her son, I'm probably going to get ahead of myself a little bit. She gets her son Jacob and she says, you go bring me a couple of little young goats, a kid, and I'm going to cook your father's meal. I'm going to cook food like your father likes it. Now I cut up all the time about cooking. Robert picks at me, we were out eating one night and I don't remember what was wrong with food, but I wasn't overly thrilled with it. He said, Mom, I don't know why you ever go out to eat. You don't like food that other people cook. I said, son, if I'm going to go out to eat, I want it to either be something I can't cook at home, I want it to be better than what I can cook at home, and I'm a good cook. I rode with him down to Fayetteville the other day, and we stopped to eat, and the young man asked me what kind of bread I wanted. He said, you want, obviously where were we, Cracker Barrel. You want biscuits or cornbread? And I laughed, and I said, well, won't you bring me a couple of biscuits, and I'll let you know whether or not they're as good as mine. He said, ain't nobody can make biscuits like Mama. I can tell you yours will be better. So when he brought the biscuits, and, we ate and whatever. Biscuits are not on my diet, but I did eat one. And when he came back to take the plates away, he looked at me and he kind of smiled. He said, how were the biscuits? I said, they were all right, but they're not as good as mine. He said, I told you they wouldn't be. But we cook and we think we're good cooks. So Rebecca's a good cook and she is used to cooking for this man. She's been married to him for a long time. I think they were childish for 20 years, so they've been married a while. And she knows how to cook the food that he wants to eat. So she goes to all of this, and while she's in here fixing food, she tells her son, put some skins over your arms. I've got that word wrong, but anyway, Esau was hairy, so they had to put something over his arms in case his daddy touched him. He would feel the hair. A lot of people some people are not very hairy, and other people are. And Esau was very hairy. So Jacob is trying to talk his mother out of this stuff. He said, what am I supposed to do if my father finds out that I've deceived him? What if he wants to touch me? That's where the idea for the skins come from. What if he wants to touch me? What if he wants to get close to me? We don't smell alike. Everybody's got their own smell. I know that shocks people. But everybody's got their own smell. Sometimes if you sweat a lot, you'll sweat out some of the smells that's actually associated. It's not a stink. It's associated with the food that you eat. Especially people that eat a lot of garlic and a lot of spices and stuff. If you sweat a lot. People who drink, if they sweat a lot. Somebody knows you were drinking last night because it's going to come out those little pores and it can be smelled. And he's saying, what if he wants to touch me? What if he wants to get close to me? He's going to know it's me. People know their own children, generally speaking. If my two sons walked in the door right now with 20 other people, I would know who my sons were. I can usually watch them walk across the floor and know who they are. And I don't mean from the front. I can watch them from behind and tell who my children are, and everybody can. Everybody has their distinctive way of doing stuff. But he's got to trust his mother because his mother is plotting to get all this stuff done. The next part of this is Genesis 27:14 through 24. I've already read. The 14th part, it says, he went and fetched and brought them to his mother, and his mother made a savory meat such as his father loved. That's the only one in here that's on there. Ooh, I thought it was more than that. After she prepared the meal, she dressed her youngest son in Esau's clothes. There comes the smell. It's his clothes. Then covered his arms and neck with the skin of goats. If daddy reaches out to touch him, there he is, that hairy finish, if that's the right word. So he goes in. Jacob told his father that he was Esau, even emphasizing that he was Isaac's firstborn. He is lying to his daddy. I remember when Mama first got sick, and Diane and I got into this discussion, Mama would see Pa all the time. Pa had been dead for years. And I'd walk in and I'd say something to Mama, and she said, "Did you see your Pa? He just left." And I'd say, "No, I didn't see him. How was he today?" And Diane would just cringe. And she'd say, "I am not going to lie to Mama like that." I said, "I'm not lying. I didn't say I saw him." But she saw him. All I said is, "How's he doing?" And she said, "I don't know how you missed him. He just walked out the door when you walked in." We don't by nature lie to our parents. Or at least our generation didn't. I don't know about people now. But we didn't lie to our parents. But she encouraged her son to lie to his daddy. Would you do that, Debbie? Would you encourage your son to lie to his father? No. No mother does that. So he goes in, and Isaac asks him who he is, and he says to his daddy, "I am Esau, I am your firstborn son, and I am bringing you food," because Rebekah knew what Isaac had said to Esau. At this point, Jacob is not only deceiving his father, but he's also engaging in blasphemy by using the name of the Lord in vain to do so, because Isaac asked him, "How did you manage to get a deer that quick? Where's my hunter again? Do you always get a deer the first 20 minutes you out in the field? Most of you don't get a deer when you're out there 20 hours, you still didn't get one." But he went out, and Isaac even asked him, "How did you get this food that fast?" And he said, God blessed, and blah, 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 blah. He enters God into their deceitful plan, which was really wrong. But it's significant that Jacob referred to Isaac's God as the Lord thy God. Scholars note that Jacob did not refer to the Lord as his God until after his dream on the journey to Haran within his vow to God in Genesis 28. Many conclude that Jacob personally worshiped God only after the promise was fulfilled through him. A very different non-worshipful Jacob is seen in chapter 27. However, Isaac became suspicious because here again he says, that voice does not belong to Esau. Mothers, daddies, when they hear their children's voice, they know who their children are. Most mothers will tell you when they went to the nursery, if your child happened to be in the nursery for a little while and heard a baby cry, you know which one was yours crying. It's just an instinctive thing. And he says the voice didn't match. Isaac was suspicious because he knew his children, so he says to him, "Come over here. Get close to me. You know, my eyesight's failing. After we get a certain age, you know, we can't see as good as we used to could. Enjoy your eyesight while it's there." But he said to him, the voice does not match. So what is the problem? So he reached out and he touched Jacob. And what he felt was the hair off the goats. But it felt like Esau because he knew that Jacob would not be hairy like that. But his hands felt like those of Esau. He asked one more time, "Art thou my son, Esau? Are you really who you say you are? Are you really my firstborn son?" Jacob replied, "I am." There he is lying to his daddy. Not a good idea, but he did. Sadly, this critical moment in unfolding of God's promise was marked by repeated deception. He repeatedly lied to his daddy. This plan of God was put into place, and God would have accomplished what he wanted to do without all of this deceit. But this is what they went in and they did. I'm not going to get through, even without reading the verses. I'm not going to get through. His father, he came near to his father, and he kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment, and he blessed him, and he said, "See, the smell of my son is as a smell of the field, which the Lord has blessed. Therefore God give thee the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine, and let people serve thee, the nations bow down to thee, the Lord be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee." That was the blessing that Isaac was given to who he thought was Esau. But he was suspicious. He didn't think that the voice didn't sound right, so he gets his son and he thinks, "Well, I'm going to prove to myself." So he tells him to come close. When he gets close, the smell is Esau. The feel is Esau. But the voice, he knew, didn't sound right. So he came in, so Isaac proceeds to ask the son that he thought was Esau to come near and let him kiss him. The kiss formed an important part of the ritual, of the birthright ritual. It was not merely a sign of affection, but constituted a show of loyalty, making this scene even more sadly ironic. Isaac had relied only upon his physical senses to determine where to place God's blessings. As noted earlier, the oral blessing of a father upon a son was much more than a wish, a hope, or even a prayer for his son. It had legal implications. It became a legal thing. We are now legally bound to the blessing that Isaac has given to Jacob. Here you go with your blessings that's going to flow through Israel, from Abraham through to Israel, and then to us as a result of God's blessings. Isaac's blessing would be prophetic and spoken with God-given authority. And here we've talked about he gave them everything. He gave everything to the wrong son. He gave it to Jacob. He told Jacob, your mother's children will bow down to you. You're going to be strong. You're going to have this. You're going to have that. And this is where our nation of Israel came into place. And you need to read all this because we don't have time to read it all. The blessing was bestowed upon upon Jacob as God intended, despite all of the deception. God's plan was moving forward, even if it was flawed, even though it was through flawed, imperfect people. You have likely heard this famous saying by the English author Walter Scott, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." If you have been through high school, you have known this. And we use that when somebody starts telling lies and they start catching up to them. When you start tangling up things and you're telling stuff trying to deceive people. Lies rarely stand alone. They soon require deception upon deception to cover them. It is no surprise that God calls his people to lives of honesty and integrity. This can be difficult. Sometimes a little deception seems justifiable. No, it ain't. Take time today to pray that God will help you be a person marked with honesty in all that you do. I tell people all the time, if I tell you something, I got to tell you the closest thing to the truth I know. Because if you lie, you've got to have a good memory. Because if you lie to somebody today, you've got to remember tomorrow what you told them. And if I lied to you today and you come up tomorrow, I won't remember I saw you today. I'm not going to remember. So you have to stick pretty close to the truth. If you're going to lie, you better practice remembering. Because somebody will say, well, don't you remember? Of course, I get credit for stuff that I'm reasonably sure I didn't say in the first place. Somebody come up, you remember when you told me this? And I thought, I can tell you that because I don't know the people you're talking about. I have people do that all the time. Don't you remember that day we were talking about? And you said, and I said, no, I didn't say. I'm out of time. I didn't say because I don't know the people. Why would I say something about somebody I don't know? But I get credit for a lot of stuff. I used to get credit for being in a lot of places I've never been either. I used to say somebody in Richmond County drove a car just like mine. According to people from off a distance, she favored me, and I said, she sure is having a whole lot more fun than I'm having. So, anyway, finished reading this chapter. We almost got through. No, we didn't. Yeah, we did. Almost. We almost got through. Finish out the, we only had 2 little sections left to go. I may pick this up next week and cover these last 2 little sections before we start on next week's lesson, because then you got to keep that flow going. These things have to be in order. And I had all my notes over here, and I didn't have time to even look at my notes. So anyway, thank y'all for coming. Thank you for your attention. Anybody have anything to say since I'm over time anyway? Then can't do much. Can't do much with me. I'm older than he is. There you go. See y'all next Sunday, same place, same time. How's that? They don't know how to cut this one off.
I get it.